Welcome back to another episode of the Lofty Lenders Homebuyer Education, where we explore tips, tricks, and stories that can help you plan for your next home purchase. Whether you're a first-time buyer, a move-up buyer, an investor, or just looking to learn, we hope you gain a little knowledge today. Today, we are exploring what documents are needed to apply for a home loan. Charlie, they say it's like surgery, really. You have to provide everything from, a pay stub to your mother's maiden name. Is that right?
And the blood of your firstborn. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Forget about that one. Yep. That's important.
It is pretty bad, though. I mean, it's not as bad as everybody really thinks when you look at how much money you're going to borrow. You just got to prove that you are a good risk, but it is a lot of paper. And so it's purely delightful.
I think a lot of people first get started with this process and they think, oh my goodness, what are they going to ask for? What am I going to need? And I think the biggest difference that we have, and it's not with every lender out there, but with a lot of other lenders out there, is we request quite a bit of paperwork up front because we want the end of that process to be nice and smooth. And, a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, what do I need? This is going to be horrible. And I also think we've got it pretty well nailed down to we keep this as simple as possible. I don't like documents. You don't like documents. We don't want to review your tax returns if we don't have to. We're going to be pretty pointed and only ask for the stuff we need, right?
Yeah. Well, let's compare it to working on your car. I mean, we don't want any more information than necessary, but we need what's necessary to give you the best results and suggestions and all that good stuff as we go through. And, if you just need a quick lube and out on your car, great. Run into any of those fast lube places. But if your car's not working well, or you don't plan to keep that car and you're going to trade it in, I mean, you have all these ifs, ands, or buts about stuff. Then it's like, okay, we need to go to a mechanic that's going to look at the entire picture. That's what we do. And when we see people and meet them for the first time, sometimes this sounds bad, but we don't always believe everything we hear because we don't always get the whole story. And when we give you financial advice and suggestions on how do we get the best bang for your buck, you get the best rate, the lowest cost, whatever the term pieces are that are going to be most advantageous to you, we can't do that with just one or two pieces. Not well. And I think that's our big differentiation. We want to give you the best suggestions and best results, not just what was fast and easy.
All right, so let's get into breaking this down and being as pointed and clear as possible, because I think a lot of people are really nervous and get anxious about what are you going to need. You say, it's not too bad. What is it? So starting off for income, if you are a W-2 employee, you work for somebody else, you work for a company of some sort, most of the time you're getting pay stubs. Now, you may get W-2s as well. You might get 1099s. It really kind of depends. And so those are the things that we are going to sort through as we're going through your application to understand what your job is and how you get paid. If we know you get pay stubs, then we're going to need probably 30 days of pay stubs, maybe longer. Sometimes we even ask for the last pay stub of the prior year if you have overtime or commissions or anything that might need to be averaged over a couple year period just so that we can see the inconsistencies of that income type. But pay stubs, for the most part, 30 years pay stubs, 30 years. How about 30 days? 30 days of pay stubs. I sometimes get a little comfortable and say, well, we really only need 2 biweekly pay stubs. Yeah, that only covers 28 days. Underwriters, most of the time, are okay with that. But last couple of pay stubs, it's not too bad, right? W-2s, depending on the program we're going with, we might need 2 years W-2s. We might need 1 year of W-2s. We're going to let you know that up front as well. But just generally having 2 years of W-2s on you is really important. And when we say W-2s, we're not necessarily just talking about the job you have right now. We're looking at all the jobs you've had over the last few years. So some people say, well, I only worked that one job for like 2 days in January of last year. Like it doesn't count. I did get a W-2 for it because I made $50, but it doesn't matter. We still need to see that because the underwriter is going to want to see all the jobs that you've had for the last 2 year period.
Yeah. Because we're really looking at consistency. And so you don't have to have the same job for a long period of time. But if you've had 12 jobs in 24 months, that's a different story. That consistency is very, very weak because there's been so much bouncing around. And so maybe now the new job is great, but that W-2 history and the pay stubs showing current, that is going to show what's happened. And therefore it's, what's risky, what's not. Again, we want to show you in the best light because then you get the best deal.
And the other piece for income that I can think of off the top of my head to start at least is tax returns. We may need tax returns. We may not. That is where your application is going to be important. If we find out you're self-employed, if we find out you have commission, there are certain other, fixed income types, things like that we might need to get tax returns for.
Yep.
However, we don't always need tax returns, and please consult with your loan officer before you upload tax returns, because if you give them to us, we have to look at them. And if we find something that, not to say you should ever hide anything, but if we find something that's going to cause additional questions, we've got to ask those questions. We've got to learn more. It could just open up a can of worms that goes nowhere, but it's just another can of worms that we have to explore and go through. Confirm with your loan officer first.
Conversations go a long way. And sometimes it depends on the loan program, because when we look at some of the down payment assistance, they want to see the tax returns just to make sure, because it's a riskier loan because there's no money out of pocket necessarily needed, and USDA, things like that. So sometimes it's for actual underwriting, calculating your income, and other times it's just part of the government guidelines to make sure that everything's being accounted for equally, consistently, and that way there's not a problem.
And sometimes they're looking at it just to see if you owned a house. I know
Mhm.
with the Iowa
Yeah.
Finance Authority, they're wanting 3 years of tax returns just so that they can verify that you haven't owned a house in the last 3 years. They're going to pull the address that you filed those returns from, or they're going to look at your schedule. Was it Schedule G for capital gains income? I don't know. I don't look at them too often, but they're going to look and make sure that you're not selling those houses, making money, that kind of stuff. Because if you have, then you're not going to qualify for some of their programs.
Yep. So nothing to be scared of. It's just depends on what's being requested and what is best for you as to what's needed.
And also income, I just thought of throwing in there as well is some people are getting ready to start a new job. We've had a lot of that recently
A
where
lot of it.
people are starting a new job. Kyle, I've got a new job that I start here in another 60 days. I haven't started yet. I'm guessing I need to wait until I can start my job before I can apply. No, actually, government says as long as you're starting your job within 90 to 120 days, I believe, depending on program, you can go ahead and close on a house with the expectation that you're going to get paid down the road.
Yep. And
Now,
it's all going
again,
to be
confirm it.
verified. So, I mean, it's
Right.
not just you say so, all that gets verified. But really, the underwriting process, for as much bad press as it gets for being daunting and not always fair, I'll be honest, for the most part, we see a lot of things that are possible that really sometimes you'd think wouldn't be. So just knowing those ahead of time, having the conversation with your loan officer and letting us know where you're at with a potential upcoming job, it's not always something to be afraid of, especially if it's in the same line of work and you're having a salary or guaranteed hours. So it's just that conversation. That way you'll know.
And Charlie can tell you from experience, because I remember talking about this once before, that it's really important that you let us know if you're going to be changing jobs throughout the process. So, or even right after closing. If you know of a job change coming, just let us know. So that way we can make sure we're prepared, because you're buying something that's the biggest purchase of your life. Underwriting wants to know, they want to make sure that the income that you're going to have with the new job is going to be enough to support your monthly payment. That's really all it comes
Yeah.
down to.
Yeah. And the initiative that the government has put out for everybody is the ability to repay. It's a great initiative, but we all know the government enforces things or enacts things with some goofy rules, but that's a fair rule. The government doesn't want to see anybody lose their house, and neither do we, neither do any of our buyers and sellers. They want to make sure everyone's safe and sound and successful. But that job change is a big one. And so, yeah, letting us know early. I know I had one at closing. It's like, oh, yeah, I quit yesterday. And I went, what?
Fortunately, he had a job not long after.
He
It was okay.
did. And we had to stop for just a minute, though, and we had some quick fixes
Yeah.
to do.
Next up is the assets. So between bank statements, typically we need to see at least the last 60 days with a bank statement, sometimes less, depending on the program again. Sometimes we need to see your retirement accounts if you're going to be using those, or if we need to find reserves. Sometimes we might get,
What's reserves, Kyle?
well, that's a good point. Reserves are typically a combination or a total of monthly payments that have been added together for all the properties that you own or are going to be purchasing to have in your account just in case. Essentially, the government does this so that if you have, say you own 3 houses and you are trying to buy a second home, for example, you're going to need to have reserves. And why do you need to have reserves? Well, the government wants to make sure that you've got enough money set aside in your bank account that if one of those properties stops making payments, you still have enough money to offset that with the monthly payments, or even if all 3 properties stop making their rental payments, you've got enough money set aside that you can make those payments for a couple of months as you go out and try to find new tenants.
Yeah, just cushion reserves. Again, it's that stability piece. Even on, we found, less pretty files. So credit scores are a little lower or job time's been a little bouncy. Reserves can help kind of buffer some of those issues and say, okay, I know I have this challenge, but I've got, 2, 3, 4, 5 months of payment reserves. And so again, it's all about stability. It's all about risk. And so the more you can be stable and consistent, sometimes that's going to help offset something that maybe isn't so plain.
And like I say, retirement accounts, sometimes we want to see your And I hate to say this out loud, but we want to see your crypto accounts. We can get into using some of that. It does exist. It gets a little convoluted, but it does exist. Trump is pushing for that as well. So there's definitely ways to use all the different assets that you have. But at the same time, we have to be careful. Some programs don't allow us to take out a loan against your car in order to use that for the down payment because they're saying that that's borrowed funds to borrow funds, either to pay Paul. So just talking to us, having those conversations, understand what assets truly are, and it's really it comes to liquid. If it's liquid assets, we can probably use it. If it's a physical asset that you own, more than likely we're not going to be able to use it.
We can use gold. It is tricky. It's
True.
one of those things. Again, the more we know, and if we talk in advance, perfect timing. I've actually had it to where we had, grandparents gift some grandkids gold coins. Again, it's tricky, but if we do it early, then there's options for almost everything. It's just the surprises that are hard to do in the last minute.
Yeah, now I'm just thinking about getting paid in gold, and that sounds like a fun time.
Start wearing the pirate necklace where you can clip off one or two pieces, and you pay for your meal, you pay for your hotel stay.
Next up, we've got identification. So usually we need to have some sort of photo ID, whether it be a driver's license, social security card, what have you, or social security, excuse me, driver's license or a passport. Thank you.
Words are hard. We do numbers.
But social security card is actually becoming more and more popular. And it's because a lot of the W-2s that we're getting have X's for the first five numbers of your social security number. And a lot of employers they don't want to list your entire social security number on there for your protection. So those are starting to become more popular requests from the underwriter simply because they want to verify that your social security number is your social security number. You gave it to us, but we didn't collect tax returns and the W-2s have it X'd out. All we know is the last four digits match. Yes, it's showing up that it worked correctly for your credit report, but technically sometimes you can get away with the number pulling correctly. It's weird, but it can work.
And I think this is where you and I cringe, and I know a lot of people do too. We want and we do everything we can to keep all of your information safe and secure, but there are so many bad players out there. And you hear all the time of somebody who filed taxes luckily I haven't had this, but they filed my taxes to get my refund before I could do it. And so all the bad players make for extra rules. So we apologize in advance for all the people who really maybe are not so helpful and break all the laws and make things convoluted because they make bad things happen and good people. We just have to do more thorough double checking just to be safe. But it's a good thing. It's just a pain in the butt.
Next up, I've got debts and REO, or what we call as real estate owned. So for any monthly obligation debts that you might have, so if you're paying child support, you're paying alimony, you're paying separation maintenance. I've got one guy who is paying a few $1,000s a month because his daughter, while she's no longer under 18 and he's not paying for child support, he is paying for her dance lessons. And so he has to pay several $100s a month and it's showing that it's coming out of his bank account. So we've got to account for that. We've got to look at, if you're paying child support, we need to make sure that you're current. We're going to be having to verify with your ex that you're current on all child support.
And that's a tough one.
That's a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's done through, typically a state agency, it's not as bad, but it depends on the circumstance. And we've run across more this year. I know I did. I guess you and I haven't talked about this much, but I've had a lot that was just handled between the two people. And that is harder to prove because there's only two people who know. And if one person is the one asking for money, we're not going to believe that person. So we got to go to the person who's been paying. Not always easy.
Yeah, difficult. But then REO, so real estate owned, if you're applying for example, I've got a gentleman right now who's buying a house and he currently owns his house and he is getting out a bridge loan to offset the monthly payment. He's able to pull some of the equity out of his existing house to use for the down payment. So we're going to have to document that bridge loan. We're going to have to document his property taxes on the current house, his insurance, his mortgage, just to make sure if he has we're getting a mortgage statement to show whether or not he has, tax insurance going into an escrow account or not. And then we're also going to need to document any HOA dues that he has because all those things have to go into being accounted for since they're not going to show up on a credit report.
Yeah.
So those are things that, again, the mortgage payment's probably going to show up in the credit report. But if he's got an escrow account set up, or if he doesn't have an escrow account set up, I've got to account for the tax and insurance.
Yeah, it's a lot. And we've been doing a lot more files where we buy before we sell. And it could be people moving up that just don't want to get out. We have a lot of downsizers because they want to freshen up the house before they sell. But anytime you're going to take and own more than one property and you're going to have that equity come after you sell, but you've already moved into the new one, there's just a lot of money movement. And that's where it can be done. It's a little bit more tedious because you have to document both places, but it's understandable. And I've got one here in the last couple of weeks we just closed on. They're not sold yet. And so we want to make sure for their own personal budget that you've got enough to make both payments. Like that's going to be stressful. I don't care who you are. You got all the money in the world, but you're making 2 mortgage payments and you've only made one your entire life. That's something that you can do, but you just got to make sure we dot the I's and cross the T's, not just for underwriting, but so that way as the borrowers, the consumers, they're not stressed out. We don't want to be stressed out like that when you buy your new house. You want to get in, enjoy, and then have those reserves ready so you're okay and not really just stewing on it every night and not sleeping.
So that kind of covers the income, assets, identification, and debts. There are a few other things that may or may not come up for you. Again, Charlie and I have mentioned this already, but just keep in mind, all this stuff is not going to be necessary for you. It's going to depend on your situation, and that's the whole point of doing an application, going through the survey, is understanding your situation to understand which ones do we actually need to ask for and which ones are we not even going to ask you for, because you might have them, but I'm not going to make you go looking for tax returns if we don't need it. So for self-employed, you might have to get like 2 years of tax returns. You might have to gather up a profit and loss. You might need a balance sheet. There are different things that may come up depending on what your business is and how your business operates. We might need to get your divorce decree. We might need to get your child support separation agreement. Maybe sometimes you have a divorce decree and a child support agreement separate. So we go through those things. Keep in mind, and something that just pops into my head is we need all pages, whether it's
Right.
the bank statements, it's the divorce decree. I got one guy who says, "Oh, you just need page 72 of my divorce decree. That's the child support. You don't need the other 71 pages." And I said, A, why are there 72 pages? But B, we do need to see the rest of those, because if you're obligated to pay any other debts that maybe don't show up on the credit report, we have to know about those because this is going towards your debt ratios. So unfortunately, we need the entire thing. And if nothing else, the underwriter needs to see it just so that they know there's nothing else there.
Well, and you got to
That,
match it up. I mean,
right.
the hard part, if you only get a couple pages, you don't know what you're missing. And if you get the pages that have the content, but you don't know whose it is, it could have been somebody completely different.
Well, to that point, the bank statement, that last page, this page is intentionally left blank. Everybody says, well, why in the world do I need this? And why do they print it out? Underwriting needs it because at the top right of your bank statement, it says 1 of 4, and that 4 of 4 is that page intentionally left blank. We got to see it because we don't know what's on it.
You could have a
be a lot
big
of stuff
debt
on there.
on that page. And normally you go checking, savings, and then debts. And so, yeah, normally if there's other debt, that's the concern. And again, it should be on your credit report, but there's still a lot of small town banks that don't report everything to credit for some reason. If there's a little debt on there, might not be any big deal, but we need to see it. It needs to be complete. That way there's nothing omitted.
Yeah. So like I said, we're going to go through the application. We're going to figure out what makes sense for you, and we're going to let you know. Don't be too frustrated by all this. This is a lot of information. But again, like we said at the very beginning of this episode, we are really focused on making sure we get as little documentation as necessary, but all of your documentation up front. I've got people calling me here recently, Kyle, it's been a week. You haven't asked for anything. It's a week until closing. Like, what's going on? Well, Matt, you're cleared to close. We're waiting on getting a closing disclosure out until we've got your seller figures, but we've already done all the hard work. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
I know I had one guy that comes to mind who reached out to me earlier this year, and he said, Kyle, I'm 3 days from close, and the lender I'm working with, they asked for something else. And then they pushed it back a day, and then they asked for
Ouch.
something else, and they pushed it back a day. I'm just not confident they're going to close on my loan. I want you to do it. You're so close, man. You're 3 days away. I don't know when that 3 days is really going to be final, but you're 3 days away.
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to switch? I don't want to just make you switch just to switch you. Like, you're so close to being done. We closed that thing in 2 weeks because it was urgent, but we were able to get everything moved over. And it was not we're 3 days away. It was, hey, we got all your paperwork knocked out right at the beginning. And even in 2 weeks, it was still quick. We still got all that documentation up front. He had already provided it to the other lender. We asked for it once. We didn't. There's oftentimes some of these big box stores are going to ask for that bank statement 5 times. I already sent you that bank statement. Why do you need it again? Oh, we don't have it. They have it. They just can't find it, or they misplaced it, or systems are clunky, or whatever. That's something we pride ourselves on. I'm not going to ask you for
Oh,
something you've already given me.
we work hard. And I will say, it does happen once in a while.
Yeah, true.
I-
We're all
at,
human.
at the same, yeah, we're all human. I swear, it's technology. Like to just throw once in a while, there's that hidden folder, like there it is. But no, and I think that the thing we always want to focus on too is that what Kyle said, what we need. But at the same time, if we get this stuff early, one, we do ask you less later when you've got so many other things going, but it helps us give you the better answer because there's a lot of little nuances. When we see what you have, we put ourselves in your shoes. It's like, hey, How can we sweeten the deal? And some of that little stuff goes a long ways.
Absolutely. Well, getting your documents in order doesn't have to be a headache, but plan for it, figure out what you need. Again, most people are going to need pay stubs, W-2s, bank statements, and your ID. Those are the most popular, common list that we're going to need. And then ask your lender if there's anything else you need to provide. Otherwise, let's wrap this up. I know this was already a long episode. Charlie, anything else on these documents that people need to remember to bring?
Just speak up. I mean, we have other incomes like Social Security and disability. So there's always something. But if you're receiving money, we need to prove it. If you're paying money, we need to prove it. And then money that you want to use, we need to prove it. So none of it's rocket science. Be clean, be clear. If you can't find it, we have other ways to get things. It's just a matter of it's easiest usually coming from you. And if you can't find it, we'll help you out.
You heard it. You heard it here. Follow us on all social media platforms and subscribe to the Lofty Lender podcast so you never miss an episode filled with helpful home buying tips and real world advice. Remember, stay curious. We'll see you next week on Lofty Lender.
See ya.